Issues coming up. We have some meetings scheduled this week and into the next year that we have to come up with contracts and CBAs. Some of them are going to be pandemic related. They're going to want certain things. We're going to have to negotiate at a higher level.
And we're still going to be working on healthcare costs. Several years ago, we brought all of our bargaining units to the high deductible health plan when we were anticipating the Cadillac tax. And we saved a lot of money for the town and actually the employees as well.
That's absolutely, yeah.
Ted's the money guy.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a new budget, and so far it looks like we're going to be okay, but we're facing a lot of inflationary pressures, so we're going to have to be very careful. We have never had to go back to the Board of Finance for extra money, and we're sure as we can that we're not going to do that this year. We've got to be careful.
Yeah. Did we, last cycle with the COVID, all the kind of sudden COVID expenses, did you guys have to go back to the Board of Finance for additional funds?
No, we were
managed?
Well, we were able to do two things. We were able to cut costs in a lot of areas because we didn't have the kids in the school 5 days a week.
Okay.
So, and we were able to access some federal and state grants that helped offset these costs.
There's some long-term financial planning that needs to be considered as well. I mean, our enrollment numbers have been strong, but if you look at demographics, things may start to slide. And while our cost per student has been much lower than our neighbors, a lot of that's fixed cost, right? And as the enrollment slides, we're going to need to consider how we're going to be able to keep that budget managed for years going forward.
We get our final enrollment numbers in October, right?
Right.
And then we'll know, because we don't always know how many kindergartners are enrolling until the last minute of school start. So we'll have a solid knowledge of what those numbers look like in October.
Absolutely. And with the current climate, with the pandemic behind, well, we're kind of getting out of the pandemic. The numbers could be astronomical this year because of people holding their children back. So we really don't have a good grasp yet. It's another challenge we have to discuss in our upcoming meetings, but that's something we really got to look at closely.
It just does reinforce that it's not the right time to take a hard right turn.
Right.
There's a lot of things facing the education of our children that are very pressing right now, and we need to balance all of the issues that sit in front of us.
Yeah. When you look at, you're talking about the student trends, I was looking at a chart recently, and over the past 20 years, it's a bar chart that has shown it just going this way. I actually started looking at it in the past 5 years. We've lost across the 12-year system almost 500 students, or maybe even a little over 500. And that's just in the past 5 years. So will that trend remain? That's speculative at this point.
Well, I think that enrollment, as Joe pointed out, enrollment in the kindergarten this year will be very substantially higher than last year, so that our total enrollment numbers this particular year are going to look reasonably good. We've also had an excellent trend at the high school. The new high school, the inclusion of the International Baccalaureate program and all of the AP programs that we offer at the high school has resulted in several students transferring into the high school, having gone to middle school at, either in a private school or in another district. So our high school is really doing well for us. But we'll have to see, as you say, the demographic trends for the state of Connecticut and for the town are not favorable. And so we have to be careful here because there are fixed costs, and we'll have to see how we can balance the load, so to speak.
Better manage that.
Yeah.
What about bonding issues? Are there any, substantial bonding projects being talked about in its early stages? Any major school?
No. We've spent a lot of money in the last 5 years on sort of catch-up maintenance. We've spent millions and millions on the schools, and they're in very good shape at the moment. So if you look at the bond service, both the interest and the principal payments we have to pay, they're trending down going into the future, because we've reached with the completion of the high school and all the work that we've done at the other schools, we've got a downward trend in the bonds going forward.
We've done a good job of not deferring maintenance.
No. We did a 10-year plan with outside consultants of everything that we were going to need to do, and then we stuck to the plan.
And how you get along?
So I've been on the board for 8 years. I would say I have a very good relationship with all of my colleagues, especially with Dr. Balistraci as the chair for the last year. We bounce stuff off each other all the time. I feel like every conversation we've had has been extremely respectful of each other. We don't always agree, but we don't get into, childish arguments or name calling or any of the things that you see on some of the other boards on television. So I think we can be very proud of that.
Absolutely. I'm going to interject there, because coming on board in the past 18 months, they kind of they listen to, we're the minority. I mean, we're 4 Republicans, there's 5 Democrats. They listen to us, and we help steer the ship. We may not always get it to the heading we want to, but we know it's not going to go off course. Amy, myself, Ted, and Kirsten, we really are able to put forth our ideas, and they listen to us, and we listen to them. And I hate to say Democrats and Republicans, because we're all colleagues. It's not a political environment. It's a great board to be on, where we all respect each other and take each other's thoughts seriously, and we debate respectfully, calmly, and it's a great experience, actually, and I look forward for another couple of years with them.
Yeah, I only remember one time that we voted down political lines, and it was regarding school start times, and it actually had nothing to do with either side not wanting to change the start times. We actually all wanted to change the start times. We just had a disagreement on how it should happen, and that's the only reason why it was a split vote.
And that just shows politics should never be in front of our kids' education.
Agreed.
Ever. It's too important to not get right. And experience matters. Managing our other parties' involvement on the board matters. And I think that our group can do a very good job, Joe, as you said, of making sure that the ship stays on course.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the issues, ironically, that we're facing, which is really unprecedented, is the issue of the endorsed slate from the Republican Party seems to be singularly focused on the matter of critical race theory. Everywhere I have gone in town, people have been confused about it. People are confused about how that happened, even the process, and they all ask the question. It's become a matter of who's telling the truth, and I'm not going to say who's not telling you the truth, but I will tell you that the current Board of Education, all 9 members, have stated unequivocally that critical race theory is not being taught. Superintendent of Schools Paul Friedman has indicated critical race theory is not being taught, and in fact our state rep Vinnie Candelora was recently at a gathering here in Guilford, and he happened to mention, along with Kristen Cohen, who's our state senator rep, that critical race theory is not being taught or approved for teaching in any district throughout Connecticut. So how do we counter that, or how do we balance that? We can only say that we believe the Board of Ed, we believe the superintendent, and we can't counter the dialogue or the rhetoric, as I like to call it. It is what it is, and if that's what they think is important to being on the Board of Ed, I'm not in agreement with it, and There's so much more to the Board of Ed than CRT.
I would encourage every voter to educate themselves about what is the truth in education, because I think there are a lot of misguided perceptions out there. I think there are a lot of misstatements out there. It's important that people educate themselves before they vote.
George Floyd matter. It basically drew nationwide attention to racial injustices. It heavily attacked policing in America, saying that it was biased. And I think out of all of that discussion, there were some folks that just were like, well, wait, and they kind of started to err, getting defensive of policing, getting defensive of institutions in this country. And I think those folks started getting concerned. And the whole issue of racial equity, diversity, it kind of came to the forefront. And I think our school system, Dr. Friedman and I think the Board of Ed, were kind of reacting a year or so ago to what was being talked about on a daily basis and spread across every line of media, and saying, hey, we, especially at that elevation, as a board and as the superintendent of schools, we probably have a duty to do some inspection of ourselves and some checking and balancing of ourselves. Are we institutionally acting as racists? And that discussion started to happen, and I think some folks in town, some right-leaning, very conservative individuals, thought that this was going to be critical race theory. Ironically, critical race theory kind of came into view through the media, talking about this, just reviewing your ethnic policies and your racial policies. By its mere review, they started associating this with critical race theory. And critical race theory is actually an academic subject matter taught at graduate schools, primarily at law schools, and it really has nothing to do with education between K and 12, and it's not even taught. Maybe one or two colleges in the country are teaching it at the undergraduate level. It's probably an elective course, if it's even that. But anyhow, they banded onto this. There was some media hype about it. It followed the whole police defunding movement. Came along with the critical. They thought that was the counter to the critical race theory was the counter, and the folks that are running against us are asserting that equity, diversity are, quote, code words, like there's something nefarious going on. They're not code words. They're the way I think most Guilford people live their lives.
I think that we were so wrapped up in the pandemic a year and several months ago, and trying to keep kids in school and masks and distance learning and how everyone was going to do all that. It may have seemed like it all came out sort of quickly and out of nowhere, and I think it sort of started with the discussion around the mascot, but actually I can say that the mascot topic is something that's come up several times prior, in the last several years before the pandemic. We've had conversations about it as a board, so that was not a new thing. And I think also some of the things that were added into the budget this year, the equity liaison for the high school and also the residency program, are things that maybe, added to these concerns that some people may have had in the direction that we were taking, but they're really good things. And obviously every time we bring something new into the school system, we're going to evaluate whether it's effective and worth the money and those sorts of things. So this is something we're going to try and see how it goes.
It's funny. You ask 5 different people what critical race theory is, you'll probably get 5 different answers. Right?
Maybe 10.
Maybe 10. You're absolutely right. And it does go to the point that people should educate themselves before they actually vote this year. I do want to say that this idea of critical race theory in schools, this is not unique to Guilford. As a matter of fact, it's sort of a national campaign that seems to be going on that is trying to infiltrate Guilford, not necessarily looking at what's occurring within Guilford and saying, oh my heavens, we have an issue here.
This is something that's at the national level, and it's forcing down into Guilford, and unfortunately it doesn't fit.
Exactly.
And to me, it seems that people say, well, we don't believe the superintendent, and we don't believe the Board of Education about critical race theory. Okay, who do they believe? Well, I think they believe the teachers, and I think they believe the principals. And if you are worried that critical race theory is being taught in your school, you should ask your principal, you should ask your student's teacher, is this in fact going on? And I think you'll get a very emphatic answer that it is not going on, and a lot of them will tell you that they're insulted, that it's being implied that they are indoctrinating children when this is the farthest thing from what they're trying to do.
And on the back of that,
The book, the book.
You-
You have a good answer about the book. But I think Dr. Freeman with that.
yeah,
book.
before we leave this topic about this hot button about a book that was sent out, is a book sent out every year?
Yes, it's
Yes.
sometimes
I got one this
often
summer.
more than one.
There.
I got one this summer.
Yeah, there you go. So there's nothing particularly unique about taxpayers' money being spent to send a book to teachers for discussion to prepare them for the
No.
curriculum for the year.
No,
Right.
it-
Thank you.
Professional development.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Every year.
All right.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, just point of clarification that'll probably get edited out. I don't believe that how to be an race, that was not part of professional development this year.
No, it was
No,
not.
it was not. Okay.
Yeah.
It was more to sensitize the teachers to the mood that was being
Right,
created
that's right,
in the
that's right.
country as a result of the George Floyd incident. And there are some interesting parts of the book where the author talks about his education and the impact on him as a black student of being ignored by a white teacher in favor of white students in the class. And that was very well done actually in the book, and I think would make teachers kind of more sensitized to having to be careful in this area. But the other ideas in this book are good examples of what happens when people who are very liberal just let their ideas go to the very fringe, and the idea that he equates capitalism and racism as the same thing is completely unproven in the book, and is in fact unprovable because it's not true. But he just says it and then assumes that everybody believes him. But I don't think anybody who teaches in the Guilford Public Schools would be foolish enough to fall for an argument of that sort.
So you're fighting tooth and nail, raising money, knocking on doors, sending out stuff. You're campaigning to fight your way into the hardest working volunteer job in town.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tell me why.
unpaid volunteer.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
That's
Well, my reasoning is, to be more of a civil servant to the community and to be the watchdog, be the proper watchdog that I know I can be regarding our children, our schools, our administration, and my neighbors, friends, and family. I want to make sure that Guilford stays on the right course. I want to steer the ship the right way to keep it, one of the best towns to live in, because I personally think it's the best town to live in personally. And keep our values close to the town values, not national values, town values. It's really important. Having too much outside influence can really pull towns apart. As you can see, it's beginning to start or creep its head into our town, which we don't want that and we don't need that. And we just have to, make sure we are staying the course.
Thank you. Amy, Vice Chair, after 8 years.
8 years. It is not 2 meetings a month.
I got bamboozled.
It is not. It is a lot of time. We do laugh, but it is a lot of time away from your family, and we all have paying jobs that are sometimes easier than this volunteer job. But we do it because it's the right thing to do. It's important to be involved in your kids' education, and this is the way to get involved in it in a public school setting, so that you know what's going on. You can support teachers, you can support administrators, and you can support kids, and you can also make sure that we're getting the best value to support taxpayers as well.
I'm going to go to the incumbents first. Ted?
Well, the other thing is that it's important that we as taxpayers have some say in how our money is spent, and that we look carefully at things like budgets. And when you look at the town, you see that the Board of Ed has by far the largest portion of the town budget. And so my particular background happens to be in budgeting and finance, and I would like to use the experience and knowledge that I have in this area to try and make sure that each dollar is spent properly, and that we minimize costs in a way that doesn't hurt the educational process, but make sure that we're not wasting money.
I can't emphasize how important that is on the board. I don't know that everyone always realizes it, because we do a lot of the budget stuff and have to tweak things, but Ted's knowledge of the budget and the pensions and everything else that I never knew anything about before I got onto the board is just so valuable to us. We would be in a very different situation without someone that has so much expertise in this area, because we do all bring something different, and every piece is extremely important.
Not to get ahead of you, Bill, but you talked to me about apathy.
Yeah.
And why you're stepping up.
This year was unique. The process for nominating the candidates for Board of Education in the Republican Party was an abbreviated one. Several steps that typically occurred did not occur this year. And honestly, I was caught sleeping at the wheel, and I caught napping. And one of the reasons why I'm running is because I want to make sure that Guilford really takes the time to think through who their proper representatives should be for Board of Education. That's very important to me, that Guilford as a whole, and certainly the Republican Party as a whole, have the opportunity to have their voice heard. The second reason why I'm running actually is because we've talked about the budget here. I do think that there are some long-term planning issues that are going to be required, certainly on the fiscal side, that the town needs to take into consideration. The Board of Education essentially is responsible for more than 60% of the town's budget. It's very, very critical that that's managed well, not just in the short term, but in the long term. And the last reason is one of the things that occurred very quickly during the pandemic is that we accelerated our movement of integrating technology into education. And both my personal interest but my professional interest has been in that space, working with schools on technology and learning, and I do think it's important that we pay a very close eye to that for the years to come.
Jim, what's your investment in the school system?
I'm going to say it's probably my two grandchildren. They're in middle school now, high school. Those are the wonder years for a parent. And I felt it was so rewarding back when my own children were in the school system to be involved. That's probably how I got involved with the Board of Finance. It was a good fit for me because of my corporate work and my corporate experience. When this situation developed in July, I was away on vacation and not thinking about running for the Board of Ed. But when I got home and received some phone calls and kind of found out what happened in the process, I thought it was time to jump in. Normally we might be able to recruit people, but it wasn't that kind of time. We were under a time constraint, and I think I bring a wealth of experience, and I will probably complement Ted's financial work, having been on the Board of Finance and worked with the school budgets for 8 years, intimately worked with them. I always like to say to people, We have nothing to do with how many pencils they buy or how many pieces of paper they buy. It's a much bigger picture. And when you're managing a $63 million budget, there's lots of components to it. And having 9 people's opinion at the table as a board is extremely helpful. We all come from different perspectives, and we bring a different order of things to the table.
You know, it's interesting. If you listen to the discourse in town right now, you think that Guilford does not have a good school system,
Right.
And that's crazy, right? We have in 2019 we won the national recognition, Blue Ribbon Honors for Guilford High School, right? I was really proud to work on Guilford High School Building Committee, managing the $92.2 million budget. I worked with some of the people here who were on the Board of Education at the time on that project. Guilford has an excellent school system. We need to make sure it's continually managed well moving forward, right? And we need to make sure that it progresses. And I think our role here is to protect and enhance the schools. The schools are excellent. They're not bad. The teachers are extraordinary. The administration is top-notch. We simply want to support them and give them the platform to move forward and enhance the learning of our kids.
Yeah, I have a great example. My oldest is in college, and when he was a freshman, he had to pick his courses, and everyone has to take, writing 101. And when they sent the course options, you could pick, advanced writing, regular writing, or one lower. And we thought about it. Maybe I should take advanced. He was very worried that he was going to be overwhelmed in his first year in school, so he took the middle of the road class. And I remember him saying, "Mom, I made such a mistake. I should have taken the higher one. I was way more prepared than I ever thought I was going to be for college writing." So
That's good.
there you go.
There you go.
Joe, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Labor is one of the most significant costs in the budget, right?
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot coming up as it relates to the CBA, as you mentioned before, and all of those things. What do you see? How do we approach the negotiations?
We do it carefully.
Yeah.
On both sides, we both want something, and we both want to maintain some high integrity, and we want to ensure that we fulfill the needs on both sides of the table. This week, I know I'm involved, and I think Amy is as well, and with the nurses on Tuesday, and I think our other colleagues are involved with the paras. And each union delegation, they have their own personality. Okay, they have their own personality. We have to come to the table, be ready to compromise both sides, and you have to do what's best for them, for us, for the town, for the children. So there's a lot of working components with that negotiation. With my background, working at the railroad, I deal with over 16 unions, and so it's every other month I'm going to one of these meetings to prepare or prep for the new CBA or for the new memo that's going to go out saying, now you have to wear masks, and what do you want to give up for the masks? It's an example. That's not really the truth, but it's the example is when you have a contract working for a company or for a school, everything has to be in writing. It has to be detailed, and it has to be accepted. And to get that acceptance, it may be a monetary increase, it may be a benefit increase, it may be some type of fringe benefit that we can negotiate. And having the knowledge and the personality to get to that bottom line for what's best for the school system, for the community, is what I bring to the table. And I appreciate the question. And we're going to do it carefully, because this year is going to be different, very different. We've had some. Yeah.
When's the teachers union up?
Next year, I think.
Will we get started again already next year?
Yeah, I think it's next year we start.
We tried very hard to stagger a lot of our contracts, so we weren't negotiating every contract at the same time.
Yeah.
We did that maybe 3-4 years, maybe even more than that, maybe in our first term, that we worked hard to get contracts off of the exact same negotiating cycle, which was appreciated.
So we've lightly covered this, and people would guess by now, but you said the word nurse. I want you to tell us what you do for a living.
I'm a nurse.
There you go.
Which is, I think I'm the only one now on the board that is in healthcare. We've had people in the past. So I think it's interesting to me, sadly interesting to me with the pandemic, because I'm living a lot of this in my professional life too. Mandatory vaccinations, masks all day long, people being shuffled around where they're not comfortable, nurses going to the hospital that hadn't been there in 10 years, and people being moved all over the place and being flexible. And I think that that's what our teachers and staff have had to do as well. They've had to work from home, learn how to be a Zoom expert, communicate with kids and worry about them all at the same time. So I think that as unfortunate as it is because of the pandemic, it does cross over into a lot of my professional life. And I hope that we can
Add value.
Yeah.
Bill, you have your own business. Tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. My business specializes in digital communications, specifically how users interact with technology, digital. One of our core areas of expertise is education. We've had more than a dozen high schools and colleges on our client list. And it is always amazing, not surprising to me, but amazing how quickly we've been able to adapt to the benefits that technology can provide in education.
Great. I know you're retired, Ted. Your background in?
I spent 30 plus years on Wall Street as a investment banker, and I worked in the United States and in a fair amount of international work. I've seen several cases where countries have tried socialism, they have tried following Marxism. In every case, this has led to financial disaster. And Venezuela and Cuba are two current and fairly close by examples. And so I find it very surprising that people would say that we would be trying to teach Marxism in the schools. This is a failed ideology that you can study it as an academic thing of interest, just as you study the idea that the earth is flat, but as a doctrine, it's dead.
I worked for a international property and casualty insurer. My career led me down a road of working on many arson and fraud cases, and I became qualified pretty much all over the nation as a qualified expert, federal courts, state courts, on both the topics of insurance fraud and arson. And I managed a large staff that did a lot of the same kind of work. So I had an administrative position doing that, which required budgeting and that sort of thing. But I do miss being in the trenches.
I'm Amy Sullivan, the Vice Chair of the Guilford Board of Education, and I am running for my third term for the Republican Party.
I'm Bill Mulligan. I'm running as a candidate for the Board of Education with the Republican Party.
Hi, I'm Ted Sands. I'm running for re-election to the Board of Education for the Republican Party.
Hi, I'm Jim O'Keefe. I'm running for election to the Board of Education as a member of the Republican Party.
I gotta redo mine. Hi, I'm Joe Galino. I'm running for re-election for the Board of Ed as a member of the Republican Party.